I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined remotely by Assembly Children and Families Committee Chair Andrew Hevesi, a Queens Democrat. So per usual, you're working on a number of bills focused on the social and physical well-being of kids, especially those in vulnerable situations, and that includes a bill dealing with access to behavioral health services while under essentially the care of the state. So what is it about the status quo that is failing kids with both complex behavioral health needs and their receiving or should be receiving services from multiple state agencies?
So I was brought in on this issue from a colleague of mine, Assemblymember Marianne Buttonshaw, who has hosted 3 roundtables now in Albany, one in the last 3 years. And the crux of the problem is we have a lot of children with complex medical needs, as you indicated, that are winding up staying in hospital stays, in beds, in hospitals, way past the time when they need any sort of care from the hospital. They're boarding now because New York State doesn't know what to do with them. And what these kids and their families are running into is New York State's siloed response of how to deal with kids with individual issues. But these children have complex medical issues that are causing them not to fit into any one of our systems. So they don't fit perfectly into the Office of Mental Health system. They don't fit into the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities systems or OCFS. And what is happening is because we don't have a place to put these kids, they're being forced to extended stays, sometimes hundreds of days in hospitals. We're paying for that. And the kids are receiving no education, no medical assistance. They don't need it anymore. And it is terrible for the children and the families. We're having these kids wind up making friends with security guards. It is a terrible waste of financial resources. It is horrible for these kids and these families. And we need to break the logjam. This bill will break that logjam by empowering the New York State Council on Children and Families, which is a state entity that has an independent dispute resolution unit that we're going to use to break the logjam.
Yeah, it's specifically dealing with that idea of interagency dispute resolution. So what are your expectations, though, for something like this? Is this going to be a case where you say, here's your authority, just jump in there and fix things? Or does it take, I guess, some sort of willingness by the agencies to engage? Because I could also imagine a world in which they become even more defiant about what they're supposed to do or what they refuse to do.
It's a good point, which is why we've written into the legislation that it's not optional. We're giving the dispute resolution unit from the CCF the ability to break that logjam so they can overrule the agencies. Because look, the agencies are not doing anything wrong, and I want to be clear about this. They're not uninterested in taking care of these kids, but they are put at a disadvantage in 2 ways. The first way is the last 12 years of the former governor were spent hollowing out all of these services and hollowing out all of these beds. We don't have enough beds. So that's number one. So when the agencies are struggling to find beds, that's a legitimate problem. But then they also have regulations on the book where they are not allowed to deal with kids who have certain problems or things that the kids have to contend with. And because they don't fit into one or the other of these silos, they're left in a limbo that we just can't allow to continue.
Is there also the possibility, though, that because we're talking about kids with complex behavioral health needs, that certain agencies might not want to take them on because these are challenging situations? And if you can make this OMH's problem and not OCFS's problem, I mean, is that kind of what could be happening here at all? Or do you feel like they are willing to take on a responsibility if it is their responsibility?
So I believe that these agencies, the people who work in these agencies, they do so because they care about these kids, they care about the families, and they really do their best to try to take care of the children, but they are hampered. I don't think they have the resources, which means enough beds or enough money to provide services in many cases. And then they are legitimately able to point to, hey, the regulations don't allow us to take these kids. So I wouldn't read into it anything that's bad intention on the part of OMH, I think, or OPWDD or any of the O agencies.
Sure.
I just think that they are hampered and they don't have the ability to handle it. And you're right. Some of these youngsters have these problems, but they manifest in violent ways. There's serious issues behaviorally and sometimes developmentally to deal with these kids, and they need services. But if you're not able to provide the full scope of services that these kids need, the agencies may be right. They don't fit in one or the other. So we need to come up with a new way to deal with these kids with complex issues, and I think we found a way to do it.
Well, lastly, on this point, coming back to the sort of expanded and required role that you're envisioning for the New York State Council on Children and Families and their interagency dispute resolution unit specifically, is this authority that they want? I mean, are they looking to step in? Are they raising their hand saying, call on me, Assemblymember Hevesi, I'm ready to dive in there. We've got the staff and bandwidth to do this.
So my understanding is yes. And also for context, so the agency that you're talking about has been around for decades. And even 2 years ago, we had to reorganize their mission and change some of the enabling statute. But the answer is yes, they are ready and willing and able to jump into this mix to do the best that they can by kids. That's what their mandate is. They just need to have some statutory hurdles taken out of the way.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Assembly Children and Families Committee Chair Andrew Hevesi, a Queens Democrat. So we are recording on Friday afternoon, and despite what the governor has said about a quote-unquote general agreement on the state's budget, which will be in excess of $268 billion, it seems to be, at the very least, there are some I's to dot and T's to cross, let alone some much larger outstanding issues. And some of those are in your world. And one of those has to do with the implementation of what's known as Raise the Age and how the criminal justice system handles 16 and 17-year-olds, and specifically how state dollars are being spent or have not been spent historically. Can you talk about what you're hoping to get in a final budget still?
I can, but I want to take a little bit of a liberty if I can, just to say.
You always do.
I always do. Sorry, buddy. But I just want to go on record saying how grateful I am to have Carl Heastie as my speaker and to support him in what's become a really unfair budget process for a variety of reasons. It seems as though we're in the governor's personal session as opposed to being actually doing budgeting. So I just want to say I support him, and we're going to look to fight for our priorities, even though the governor prematurely announced that we were done. Some of those priorities, as you mentioned, include Raise the Age. So as you know, Raise the Age was passed in 2018, and every year the state was supposed to be putting out $250 million a year annually to fund it. The state has not done that. That was a broken promise from the former governor that we haven't fixed yet. But in this year's budget, there's a bill carried by my colleague, Assemblymember Romero from Albany, that will drive money directly into the community groups that we should promised would get Raise the Age money in 2018. That is a $50 million pot that is still on the table, and it's hugely important. And I believe that we will be able to have a positive result on this one. And it's been a long time coming.
And it's not just that this money is spent, it's how it's spent, right? Because this is supposed to be this restorative process and also ensuring that kids are connected to services and not necessarily moving to prisons, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we need this money to make Raise the Age actually work. We've done the legal part, so we're diverting kids away from the adult criminal justice system into family court, but the family courts don't have services to send the kids to. So if you don't have those services, you're not really fulfilling the mission of Raise the Age. Once we get the money into those community groups, I believe that you'll have a much easier time dealing with the kids that are caught up in these issues.
And how about the child care front? Because the governor made a big deal coming into this year's session about investing in funds to get on the road to universal child care. And there is major dollars that we expect to see in this budget for, say, child care subsidies. But there's been a lot of concerns raised about the child care access Child Care Access Program.
The Child Care Assistance Program.
Yes.
Yeah, CCAP. Yep.
Yeah, CCAP. Right. Should have just done with the acronyms. But there's been a lot of concern about these programs, especially in New York City, running out of money and needing to stop taking applications, to shut down eligibility windows. What are you looking for in this year's budget? And is it just about money for this program, or are you also looking for language related to how this money is spent and when it can be accessed?
You have to have both. And if you have one without the other, you're going to fail. So you're right. We have wait lists in the city of New York with a large fiscal attached to it. And then you have wait lists in, I believe it's over 30 counties. I don't remember the exact number. And then there are some counties that are just flat out not taking any people and putting them on their wait list. And this is a function of us growing towards universal childcare. This is a good problem. More people want childcare. But the problem is we need to invest to get rid of these wait lists. Now, Now, that's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars. It'll take a different pot for upstate than it will for the city. They're different financial animals. But then we need to make sure that we don't repeat the problem we did in last year's budget, which was that we put in a provision that sounds logical, but caused some difficulty in the statute last year during the budget, which basically said that counties have to spend down all of their pre-existing money before they get any new money. Well, counties don't operate that way. We need to be more nuanced. There are some counties that were in that circumstance, but that part of the statute stopped other counties from gaining access to this money when they could have. So we need to have both policy and money flow to solve this problem. And that's another reason why I'm supportive of Speaker Heastie. This budget is not even close to being done. We haven't talked about this yet.
And what does that mean to say you haven't talked about it yet? Does that mean there's not, like, the governor, Assembly Speaker, and Senate Majority Leader aren't in a room, that the relevant staffers? I mean, is this something that you think should be at that level?
Before the budget gets done, everything gets to that level. Everything goes through. Look, we pick Carl Heastie, and I'm going to sing his praises again because the guy solves more problems in a day, some of the most complex, intractable problems than I've ever seen, and he does it beautifully. I am incredibly grateful to have him. But it all has to go through the leadership level. They all have to agree on the financial picture first. How much money do we have to spend? We haven't done that. And then you've got to get down into the nitty-gritty and go over every part of childcare. So that means they'll have to talk about CCAP. They should also be talking about the Senate's proposal to put $500 million in the workforce. They should also be talking about enhanced rates for kids with developmental disabilities. All of it has to percolate up to the three people in a room at some point, and we haven't been able to get anywhere near it for the last 5 weeks while the governor continues to push her for agenda items.
On Thursday, the speaker said he's never doing this again in terms of the budget process this way. You've seen budget approaches with different governors, different legislative leaders. What is the alternative that the assembly could actually force the governor into taking on? I mean, what cards does the assembly and Senate have that they're not playing that could prompt a different approach from this governor?
Structurally, right now, we don't have a card to play, and that's the problem. So the governor in the budget has the right to send us all of her agenda and make us do an up or down vote in a budget extender. So she can roll us anytime. So what we have been doing over the last 5 weeks is trying to take the bad things from her 4 proposals and make them less bad before we go and even start talking about the good things that we're going to be doing for New Yorkers. And I say this with respect. This is not about Governor Hochul. Personally, I like her very much. I am supportive of her, and I understand why she's doing this as governor. But structurally, between the Silver versus Pataki decision, and I'm not complaining about this, but the lack of payment for one side of the negotiation as opposed to the other is just a structurally unfair system. So the card that we should have to consider playing is a constitutional amendment, but even that's frightening and scary. So right now we are at a structural disadvantage, and you're seeing the bad result is government is essentially stopped. There's no numbers. This is just a bad way to do budgeting. And I'm with the speaker. The structural problem is what we're complaining about, not the personal problem. Governor Cuomo did this too. He was a little rougher with it. This is just a structural problem between the governor and the legislature that shouldn't remain. It's bad governance.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Andrew Hevesi. He's a Queens Democrat. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. Good talking to you.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.